Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Caleb Owens and this is the Psychology Research Report module. This is mounted usually on Canvas as one big quiz, where in between each of these videos there's a few practice questions to make sure you're keeping up with content. This guide will help you write research reports for psychology. Now, there are a lot of resources out there for you already, just to give you a general sense of what the aim is. Academic Writers, one of the main ones I would recommend, because that's straight from APA, the American Psychological Association, which is where we get our rules about how to format things and things like that. It's all there, it's just there's so much of it. So what I'm going to do in this module is kind of condense it down and give you a little more. The other resources you might find useful are writing for psychology books. I've got a few examples there. And their book, don't buy anything, just borrow one from the library, thumb through it, see if you can get an online version, have a flip through it. It'll give you advice very similar to what I'm going to give you in this module about how to put a report together. And right in the bottom right there, I've got an actual paper, because when you learn how to write psychology reports, you learn how to read psychology reports. And if you're learning how to format psychology reports in APA format, then you can just look at a lot of papers that are already published. With a few caveats, sometimes journals have slightly different rules into the way things look. And know when you submit a research report assignment, you do not need to have 2 columns. Don't do that. Don't go to that extra trouble. Makes it harder to read. Most of those writing guides I just showed you, though, focus on the structure of the end product, what goes into each section of the report. They don't always tell you what you should be doing in the order you should be doing it. And that's why I felt I needed to make this module. This writing guide is going to take a procedural cookbook approach and, as I just said, show you exactly what you should be doing and in what order. Don't mistake what you're doing here. A psychology report is very different to a high school essay or even an APA essay. You actually need to learn these skills. You need to learn what to do for each section and how to build up your argument and so on. It's tragic when I hear someone's failed a research report assignment and they send me long emails or have meetings with me and talk about the hours and hours of effort they put into it. Effort is not always equal. And if you're putting effort into the wrong things and you don't have the skill to assemble a report, your effort is going to be completely misplaced. So this module will hopefully help you focus your effort on the tasks you need to be doing, and so that you're not spending hours and hours doing the wrong thing. The other important thing to understand is you need to learn the process of assembling a research report. And you can't learn that process by just looking at the end product. You can't learn how to cook a dish by just looking at good examples of dishes. You go, right, now I know where I'm headed towards. Let's just shove things around until I think that my report looks like that. Even if you succeed, you've probably wasted hours of your time by putting it together in the wrong way, but you never learn the process. You never learn a process with academic integrity, with research integrity, a process which helps you understand the content by doing it that way. To learn how to cook good pork crackling, I went to YouTube, and I think he's called Chef John. He's probably got a Chinese name, but Chef John taught me how to make the most awesome pork crackling, step by step by step. I was surprised how many steps there were. That's how you learn how to do things. Now, there are exemplars in this module, but what you don't want to do is go, aha, an exemplar, let's pause and let's just copy that and reverse engineer that. That's not going to help you either. Any better than I could learn how to cook by just looking at lots of final products. The technique I want you to escape from, which I see too many students fall into, and even honours students and even postgraduate students, is where you've just got one thing which may have been just created from nothing or generated by AI, and you just iterate on it. You change it over and over and over again, saving over the top of all your progress. So you have no way of going back. You have no record of authorship, but also it's just hours and hours spent just looking at this blob and making minor alterations. Don't do it that way. The technique I want to teach you here is how to take notes, good notes, keep a record of those, how to draft up the sections in the appropriate order. And then at the end, if you want to use AI, I'll give you some suggestions on how to do that before the final checking and polishing. That's a system, that's a linear approach, like a cookbook. And that's what you need to learn how to do to write a good research report. Now look, I'm not saying the top approach is necessarily dishonest, but you know what? If you're iterating on the same piece of work over and over again, you have no record of what came before, then what you've created by the end of all your effort is something that is entirely consistent with a contract sheet, someone who's just outsourced it to a person in Nigeria, and they've written the assignment for them, or someone who has just used AI to plagiarize or use AI to generate, because you're just left with this single file and nothing else. Whereas the bottom approach, you've got records of everything. That's a record of authorship. So not only is the bottom approach the better approach, but it's going to mean that if someone says to you, I think you used AI for that, you'll be able to say, no, look at this, 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 and this. It proves all the work I did. Whereas the top one, I've interviewed many a person who's probably not that honest, and they'll say things like, I lost the draft, or yeah, there was a draft, but it was on my old laptop. They're lying more often than not, but you don't want to be doing something that's consistent with that kind of behavior. So yeah, you've got to learn these skills, you've got to learn the approaches. You're not going to learn the steps by just looking at exemplars. Now, how research report assignments work is going to vary from unit of study to unit of study, university to university. This is just the way they normally work, at least in my sphere. And at least at the University of Sydney, a lot of research report assignments have worked this way. They are authentic in that there's a unique study that you're often a participant in. The study will run in week 2, the very first tutorial, or in the January intensives. Often that step doesn't happen, it's just given to you. But you're a participant in the study, you contribute your own data, and then after that, you're given all the materials, and even though you were just a participant, you're asked to pretend to be the researcher. And this can be a sticking point, and I'm sorry, it's the way it is. I don't know, it makes it authentic in the sense that you were just a participant, you experienced it. So there's no funny business here. Now you're being asked to pretend to be the researcher who designed the study. The reason why I say it's a sticking point is you often, when you're asked to pretend to be the researcher, your first reaction might be, why would I ever want to do a study like that? What? And I guess that's the first step of the process. You've got to work out why on earth a study like that would be done. But be in that mindset, because from that point on, you're now going to write a report up as if you're the researcher and all that entails. Some other aspects of the assignment which may or may not differ across units of study. You're given the method section. You don't need to write one. That's certainly what I do. I don't want to give out marks for people for writing sentences like there were 600 participants. You can get AI to do that perfectly well these days anyway. And you're given processed results. That's what I like to do with p-values. But you never know, in higher level units, you might be asked to do your own statistical analysis or some basic statistical analysis. And the final point there, and this is a relatively new innovation I brought into the assignments that I run, you're limited to using set references. So there's only 2, maybe 3 set references that you're given by the person who sets the assignment, and you're told you must only use these. And it's in your best interest not to read more widely, because you'll be writing your report thinking, well, I wish I could mention that, I wish I could say that, but you don't want to do that. You just want to stick to the set references. It does mean, though, and because I'm making this module, that I'm not going to include content centrally in the module for how to find more references. I might make an appendix if the module's taken up by other units of study, but at least in the units of study I'm running, it's usually set references. Okay. Understand what you're doing for the assignment, the learning outcomes. You're understanding the APA-style research report format. And it's really a test of your presentation and communication skills. You need to understand the purpose of reports, and you need to be fairly creative and also somewhat argumentative in that you need to present a compelling report. Now, what do I mean by a compelling report? A lot of students assume this is what a research report is. Describe the research you conducted, summarize prior research and list hypotheses, describe results, and then reiterate findings from past research. I promise I won't use that voice ever again. Huh? This is not what a research report is. It's, I don't know, maybe it might be in biology or physics, but that's just boring crap. We're just recording what happened. No, what you want to do, and this goes back to you pretending to be the researcher, what you want to do is describe and promote the research you conducted. This study had to be done. That's the purpose of the introduction. Look at what came before. Look at the questions unanswered. This is why we need to do the study. It has a kind of emotional, motivational push to it. Promotion. You emphasize the uniqueness of the study, and you emphasize the methodological advances over prior research. That's what you do in the introduction. It's not just this dead, here's what happened before, here's what we're doing now. It's, this is why we're doing it. This is why it has to be done. It's an argument for the existence, because that's what researchers have to do. It's not a world that just naturally appreciates science, quite the opposite, in fact. So as scientists, you have to learn to promote, and don't just chuck it into AI so it's saying nonsense rhetoric like, oh, this is a novel study and never been done before. I'll give you some examples of that later. Actually think through, why did this study need to be done, and make a convincing argument. In the discussion, you're then emphasizing the findings. What was found that was unique? What does this mean? What's the significance? And again, that will help you write a good discussion section. So you're not simply saying, oh, we found what was found before. Our results align with prior research. No researcher wants to have results which align with prior research. What? No way. You want to find something new and unique, work out what it is in your study, go with that. That's how you do it. So you're ready to start. Okay, you've got to assemble your materials, find your set references, get your methods section. And this is your main assembly task. You've got to read the method first. Highly recommend you do that. Find out what the current study did. There might even be an opportunity to do the current study again if you need a refresher on what the experience was like. You don't get any points for labeling independent or dependent variables in a research report, so you'll never use those terms, but you kind of got to work out how it works. So what were the conditions? What was changed? Okay, and then what was measured? And why would we measure those things? Why would we change those things? You've got to work it out. What was the purpose of it? Why did we do this study? What was the purpose of the design? Your understanding of design concepts from your introductory psychology will help hugely with you just trying to work out, why would we do that? Why did we change that and measure that? Now, part of the clue for what's going on is going to be in the set references, because the study doesn't come out of nowhere. The study's going to have arisen from or be inspired by previous research. So your other task is to work out how it goes beyond that previous research. But if you're struggling making notes on these first few questions, you've read the method, you seem to understand it, but you're not quite sure why or whatever be done, then it's time to hit the set references. But everything on this page, that's your main task. So where to start? Once you've read the method. Once you've read the method, you've sketched up some notes, you have a vague idea about what happened, but you're kind of a bit fuzzy on why, then start reading the set references. Reading papers for the first time can be a daunting task. Reading technical papers at any time can often be daunting. So people often ask, well, what's relevant and what isn't? And geez, how do I get through this? There's a results section that runs for 3 pages that talks about meta-analytic, factorial. Oh my God, I can't even read that. Now, in this age, you can actually pop a results section as an image file straight into AI and it'll explain it to you, but it still might not be relevant. So how do you know what's relevant? The method tells you what's relevant. That's why you read the method first. Read the method first, And then when you're on your first fiddly paper, you'll hopefully be able to see, oh my God, that's what we did. Oh, how about that? That's how it corresponds. That's what you're doing. So you're looking for the theories, the accounts, the hypotheses of that other paper, other papers. You're looking at what they did in their method and what inferences they drew from that method. That's really the guts of the paper. Don't be distracted by, the literature review stretching back decades or little details in the results or how they constructed their stimuli. Focus on what were they manipulating, how did they draw inferences from that, and then map that onto our study. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for those similarities and differences. And as you do this, you're taking notes, good notes, notes on the level of exactly what I just described, what they did, what methods they used, and how they drew inferences from that. And this is actually real notes I took myself many years ago when I was doing a research report study as the convener of the study, and it hadn't been released to students yet, but I was trying to work out what on earth happened here. Another researcher had created the study for me, so I was desperately trying to work out why he had done what he'd done. And I actually asked him to check these notes, and he seemed to get it, seemed to understand what I was getting at and think, yeah, I think you're right here. But this is the level of detail I needed just to work out what was going on. Now, the way I've organized this, I've got 3 columns. Each column is a paper, and the last column is the current study. And you can see I've got a big breakdown, stimuli, test, interval, assessment, findings, and some extra notes at the bottom where struggling to work out how our study went beyond it. If you've only got 2 set references, this might be the way you format your notes. Oh, here's another suggestion. And here we've got 1 row per source, 1 row per author, which isn't as necessary if you've only got 2 set references. But if you want to scale this method for an honours thesis or maybe a research report where you're going to have more than 2 references, then this might be the way to go. And you can still have columns, things that are relevant. So that very last one there, does it support the ego threat account? Well, that's very specific to the topic, but it might be something of interest if you're collecting a lot of papers. And notes, again, the notes are at the right level of detail. Here are some bad notes, and I see this a lot. In my units of study, I ask people to submit notes. I want to force you to make a time-stamped record, but also it allows me to kind of browse through them and see what's going right and what's going wrong. And these are some examples of real notes I saw last semester where people really thought it was important that there were 27 men and 26 women and they had to receive a B grade. It's just completely irrelevant. It had no relationship to our method whatsoever. Or bad notes where they just copied and pasted. That looks like it's from a results section. God knows what that means. The student Newman-Cool's post hoc comparisons. What? Why would you copy paste that? I have a feeling that was just someone who was like, oh, we have to do notes, fine. And they, used AI or just copy pasted. That's not notes. Reading is processing. Reading is thinking. As you read those papers, don't just drearily summarize. Don't. You've read the method. You know what the objective here is? The objective here is you're only reading that paper to see how it relates to our method. That's your focus. So you don't drearily read it and summarize about the student Newman-Cool's post-hoc analysis. You actually try to focus in on the topic. The last example there on the right, our study used computers, whereas their study used paper tests. It's not important. They've missed the main event. It's getting there, though. It's still bad. It's ultimately notes that will go nowhere. But I suppose it's an attempt. This business of sample size and who the sample was, don't waste your time on it. Just don't waste your time on it. That's why that's an example of bad notes. Who cares, ultimately? If they are significant, then it'll be something you'll work out later. But right now, no, don't be writing down stuff about the sample. Reading is thinking. These are good notes. And I guess these are kind of specific examples that you're not able to evaluate yourself. But I'm telling you now, in terms of the topic, these were notes where someone, in order to write these out, they've clearly read our method section and then they're kind of focused in on, I can see. So they did that. Now that's different to what we did. That's the critical comparison. That's the kind of notes you want. The notes which ask what was done to draw inferences and what logic was used to discover knowledge and support conclusions. That's, means almost the same thing. How did the study work? Okay, and how does that compare to our study? What's the logic they used? What's the logic we used? Don't be too general, and AI will probably want to do this for you, so don't use AI for note-taking. What was their overall aim? What was their final conclusion? The other thing about too general notes like that is when I read notes like that and then how they appear in the research report, I often think that person's only read the abstract. And if you give AI an abstract, that's the kind of nonsense it's going to come up with. So too general, who cares? And you don't want to write a research report where your only mention of prior research is, what was their conclusion? They concluded this, and they concluded this, and they concluded that. You've just written a paragraph of people making assertions, and the reader has no idea what kind of method they used, what kind of study they did. It's too general. It's a waste of time. If you know that you're going to be comparing methods with our current method, and you're ultimately going to be writing that up, here's what they did and here's what we did, then don't waste your time with taking notes on, oh, they concluded this and they concluded that, because that shouldn't make it into the final product anyway. Irrelevant detail, too far the other end. What was the sample size? How many questions did their questionnaire have? You're looking at the wrong things. It's not important, okay? Don't take notes on it. It's there in the set reference if you need to look back on it later on if it does become relevant, but don't clutter up your notes with that and don't waste your time reading through all that stuff. So once you've got good notes on our method and the other papers that you plan to use or have to use, then save them, email them to yourself to timestamp them, or if you're in one of my units of study, actually submit them, because that will force a timestamp and allow you to record that evidence of your authorship. Looking for similarities and differences between the method we did, trying to work out how the study we did differs from the set references. You're looking for innovations. So we did that different. Why did we do that differently? Oh, were we trying to answer a new question? Were we trying to answer the old question in a different way? Was there perhaps a potential flaw in the way it was done previously? We're improving on it slightly. Why are we doing it? Don't kid yourself how long this is going to take. Don't get frustrated. Skim through our methods, skim through the set references and go, oh, I have no idea, and now start email bombing your tutor or lecturer. Don't do that. This here, including the note-taking and sifting through and finding comparisons, 10 hours, 5 hours at the least, a long time. And the reason why you should spend that amount of time on it is because this is central to everything. That's almost half the time you'll spend on the whole assignment. But you want to work all this out before you start writing or planning anything, because it's going to be so obvious if you start creating a research report and you don't have answers to these questions. It's going to be so obvious when you submit your research report if you just don't understand the basic details of the set references, the basic details of our method. It's going to be obvious. So take your time on this first step. Watch this part of the module over and over again. Spend a lot of time until you've got this straight, because this is kind of our ingredients that go into the cooking. And you don't want to go, oh, black pepper? Oh, I've got white pepper. That'll do, won't it? Surely. Well, you've got to be careful with things like that. Don't mess up your ingredients. These are the ingredients. Reading, taking notes.